So, I've mentioned it a few times, but I grew up Mormon, or in the LDS Church. And as fucked up as the church can be from an outsider's perspective and from a retrospective lens, I think I was pretty lucky when it comes to sin, because Mormons don't really have the same concept of sin as the rest of Christianity does. They don't really have a hellfire and brimstone kind of hell. Fun fact, the first time I heard the word brimstone was from that fucking joke in Shrek. So, yeah, not a lot of hellfire preaching by the Mormons. Instead, they have something called eternal darkness, and that's reserved for basically everyone who isn't Mormon. Anyone not baptized in the church, willingly or after they're dead, which is a whole other topic, um, gets sent to eternal darkness or spiritual nothingness. When everyone who is on church records as being baptized goes to one of the three levels of heaven, the terrestrial, the telestial, or the celestial. I'm not here to preach or teach about Mormonism. I'm a pagan. So I'll just leave it as those levels of heaven, and the only one where you get to see God and Jesus is the celestial level, and that's what everyone is striving for, basically. And any type of sin brings you down to a certain level, and it's really hard to get back up. But the thing is, sin in the church isn't exactly defined as by God's decree. Apart from the Ten Commandments, the rest of the ways a Mormon can sin is stuff written by church leaders, and that can change and does. And the stupidest things get pushed as sinful or against the words of wisdom. Like it has a ban on things like fucking soda and tea and coffee because caffeine is technically a drug, and in some families it's treated with the same seriousness and prohibition as actual bad drugs and alcohol. It's insane. And then there's the stuff regarding dress and sexual activity and marriage, and it's just a lot of controlling every facet of people's lives. And the other thing is, it's up to the parents and families to interpret what is serious and what isn't. Like, my family was pretty lenient on the whole caffeine and alcohol thing. My parents drink alcohol, beer and wine, and everything else on occasion, and all of us indulged in soda and coffee without hesitation. My family was basically black sheep status with any church congregation we went to because my parents weren't the Puritans everyone else strived to be. And I'm grateful to them because the other families and kids looked and acted absolutely miserable. Okay, now that I've ranted about that, let's get back on topic. So, Mormons treat sin as more of an offense to the church rather than an offense on God or Jesus. Sure, it might be touted as you're not being like Jesus or that's not what God would want, but it was more often church doctrine doesn't say to do this, so don't do it. If it did get pushed as God or Jesus being involved, it was more akin to a disappointing parent. As if Jesus would be seeing you drink a Diet Coke or masturbating or just shake his head in disappointment at you, but not say anything until you asked him for something, and then he'd just ignore you passive aggressively. But all jokes aside, that's really how it really was. And like the whole three levels of heaven were treated more as a ranking system. Like, yeah, you're getting into heaven, but you're only going to stay at the terrestrial or this telestial level. And if your family goes to celestial level without you, you'll never see them again. Which honestly leads a lot of people to abuse others or accept abuse because of some delusions of piety. There are some shit people in our different wards that we had through the years. And seeing those people against people like my family and our friends who were more spiritual and took the teaching as teachings and not commandments that doom all who don't follow them it obliterated the concept of damnation and sin for me. I feel bad for people whose stories involve the trauma and religious PTSD of hellfire and damnation. I find hell to be a fascinating concept, and my pagan/mythology nerd brain loves learning about all the different demons and concepts of hell in all sorts of sects of Christianity as well as other religions. There's a quote from Neil Gaiman where he's interviewing about Sandman. He heard someone say, "The Bible says hell exists, and I can believe a hell exists, but there's nothing in there that says that anyone is there." And that's how we got the Lucifer and hell stuff in the comic series, and I love that. It makes my fiction writer brain churn, and especially with Hellboy's depiction of hell in an afterlife is another cool concept for that. So, you see, I'm not scared by hell. It just doesn't come into my radar of fear. When I was still Mormon and doing stuff like the fucking sinner's prayer bullshit I did a couple times, it wasn't out of fear of hell or anything. It was out of fear of God abandoning me because of my actions. It was out of fear that God seeing me as lost and not bothering with me anymore. And no matter what I did, no matter how to what I became, I was gone. Obviously, that's no longer a problem for anymore. God and I are on clear terms that I'm not welcome when it comes to him, and I'm fine with that. But that fear, that worry of abandonment or divine retribution on my life does follow me into paganism. Even though Hellenism has a different concept of what offends the gods, and there's a better acceptance of just being human and the nature of humanity, I still worry sometimes. Like, does doing this count as desecration of a devoted sacred space? Did doing that here offend the gods? Could they have caused this bad thing in my life because I did this? That's latent Christianity, which is a thing better explained by other people, but I'll explain it later in another essay. So it's something that I deal with, and it's something that I struggle with. But because my gods don't proclaim to be any of the omni whatever, or are shitty overbearing entities, I feel so much more comfortable with them and happier having a relationship with them. It's a relationship built on mutual respect and admiration and exchange, not fear or sin or hellfire. But anyway, thanks for listening.